Welcome back to Rising, and we have strategist and political commentator Ameshia Cross joining Batya and I. Hello, Ameshia. Good to see you.
Glad to be here.
All right, Batya, what's next on our agenda?
So Democrats should be worried about the youth vote in this year's midterm elections. This, according to the Washington Post. Early voting numbers among younger voters between the ages of 18 and 29 in the party are down. And because young people favor Democratic control of Congress by 57% to 31%, getting them in to vote in this election is crucial for Democrats.
That's right. A poll from Harvard's Institute of Politics found that just 40% of young people said they would definitely vote this year. The Post reports. Meanwhile, former Vermont Democratic Governor Howard Dean weighed in on the role another important voting group for Democrats in an interview with News Nation's Chris Cuomo. Let's listen.
Which voters matter most, Howard, in that race and for Democrats? Is it going to be black women again who are 35 to 55?
Black women always matter. They are probably our most important and reliable constituency group.
Which makes it surprising that you guys don't do more for them when you're in power.
Well, Biden has actually put more black and people of color and women in positions of power than Obama did.
No, so I'm talking about in their own families and what kinds of opportunities are done
I'm talking about
and how their rights are secure.
Politico reports that black voters account for 29% of early voters in Georgia this year, which is higher than their market, just upwards of 27% in the 2020 presidential election. Yet of the 5 million or so Georgians who voted in 2020, about 2.7 million have yet to cast a ballot this fall, Politico writes. You know, I thought that was a very instructive answer from Howard Dean there when he was asked, you know, what has the Biden administration done for this core constituency group? He did not say what policies they have implemented that black women might want. He said that he talked about representation in the administration, which is a very, I would say, way of sidestepping the policy concern. Like you could have better representation, totally increased representation without actually doing a darn thing that constituency or any other constituency wants. Did you find that satisfying, Ameshia, to hear that, well, we're increasing the representation?
Well, I think that it's important to note the representation. Obviously, having Ketanji Brown Jackson sit on the Supreme Court, having Vice President Kamala Harris, several others in leadership roles, including the current White House press secretary. But beyond that, I think that he missed an opportunity. And I like Howard Dean. He's a very smart strategist, and there's a reason why he is being utilized on the campaign trail at this point and in several conversations. But he missed a golden opportunity to talk about what the administration has done. And this administration has not particularly made a black woman's agenda in terms of policy, but what they have done that has helped many black women includes the child tax credits. That was a huge thing, particularly for black women who largely are the head of households in many families across this country. Small business funds, particularly for black women who house the most small businesses of any group. When we talk about the student debt and the changes to the student loan system, particularly student debt relief. This affects black women because they carry the largest burden of student loan debt across the country. Again, he missed an opportunity to have those conversations and really a deep dive into some of the policy arenas that haven't necessarily been tagged as black woman agenda items, but because of who they are going to affect the most, he definitely could have brought that into the conversation.
Yeah, I think it feels perfunctory to say, well, we've hired more people who fit this demographic without saying, because you're right, he could have said the student loan thing or any other things. What did you make of it, Batya?
Well, I'm very curious what you think about this, Ameshia, because we've run a few pieces at Newsweek by black men who feel that this focus on black women in the Democratic Party has been coming very much at their expense. And you're sort of seeing that in polls in Georgia, for example, where Stacey Abrams is really struggling with black men. And, you know, she had this quote over the weekend where she said that they're being targeted with disinformation, which, you know, a lot of black men took issue with and felt was really insulting. But in particular, this focus on black women leading, I've heard personally from friends, but also we've run pieces and we've seen in the polling, this sense that black men now are feeling left behind in the way that I think a lot of white working class men have felt left behind. When you see this huge gap between, you know, people going to college, women have taken the lead on that. I'm curious if you're seeing that as well, that gap, and what you make of that.
It's quite frankly frustrating because I do think that there are some inside community conversations that are being held amongst Black people, specifically because of progress that Black women have made economically, progress that Black women have made educationally, things like that, where we still see that there are issues related to Black men making that same level of progress. But politically, we have to look at these within the margins. 97%, 98% of Black women solely vote for the Democratic Party. And Black men aren't too far behind them, teetering in at 92, 93%. So it's not some huge rift that we're seeing. Black men and Black women largely support Democrats. What we're seeing in Georgia is a little bit of a different story because this is one case where you see, at least in that Senate race, 2 Black men running against each other. And this is a very different type of scenario because it puts Black men, honestly, pitted against one party or the other. And also you have a state where, SEC country reigns supreme, and you have somebody who, in my estimation, is a complete buffoon who's running for Senate in Herschel Walker, but somebody who is represented and somebody who Black men have loved for a very long time. Sports and Black men are like peanut butter and jelly. So seeing these things together run in tandem, I think that it is positing something very interesting to watch. New York Times read an article about this yesterday, basically looking at Georgia and how this is shaking down, because I do think the Black male vote in Georgia is going to be very interesting to see, because that split in that vote break amongst Democrats and Republicans is largely going to be because Black men see themselves reflected in a Black candidate who stands for another party, who also in many ways represents what they actually appreciate. Outside of the scandal and everything else that's going on with him, Herschel Walker is a Southern Black man who was born and raised there. He's somebody who talks like a lot of people's uncles in the South. He's somebody who, again, they watch play football for years, and he represents something that many people can actually appreciate. I will take a step back, though, because I think that what we see in Stacey Abrams is doing herself absolutely no favors, because she is literally blaming her campaign losses, the L she has taken on the trail, the fact that she's literally delivered a horrible campaign strategy for months now, solely on Black men. And that's a problem. And quite frankly, Black men in Georgia are frustrated. Black men across the country are frustrated in watching how she is basically not taking ownership of the mistakes her and her campaign have made, and are solely laying that at the feet of Black men. She's starting
to have a kind of Hillary Clinton-esque, I didn't fail, others failed me, about her inability to get elected, and it's not a good look for anyone, and I think that's setting in. I also want to talk a little bit about the youth vote, which was alluded to in this segment. I don't think Republicans are poised to capture the youth vote. They're usually not. It does seem to me, and I've seen some polling to suggest this, that young people on the right, young people who are Republicans, are kind of trending even more conservative than previously. So that will be interesting to watch. But Democrats don't really have a candidate poised to capture the youth spirit either, because their candidates are all so old on the national profile. Same is true of the Republican as well, obviously, but young people in the Democratic coalition obviously preferring a kind of Bernie Sanders economic kind of left-wing stuff, but not really having a new person to get excited about. So I could see the youth turnout just kind of being demoralized and depressed. What would you expect, Batya?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this, to me, I know, Ameshia, you don't agree on this, but I think the student loan forgiveness seemed to me like a sort of last-ditch effort, almost a bribe to get young people to show up. And now, of course, it's being held up, and we'll see what happens with that. But I don't fault them for not being excited about the Democratic Party right now, because I think in many ways, the future that they sort of thought they might have based on what their parents' lives were like, their grandparents' lives were like. I mean, the American dream just seems so far away for a lot of young people, even a lot of millennials. The idea of home ownership and, taking that next step, building, a home in a community. How do you capture the imaginations of young people when you're not promising them the future that they might want to envision themselves as part of? And I think that's sort of, it's both parties have fallen down on this, but I obviously have been extremely critical of the Democratic Party on this front. So I don't fault them necessarily. It's that they're not being offered anything to get them excited. Where are you on this, Ameshia?
Well, young voters, regardless of election cycle, tend to tilt Democratic. be it whether they're more on the moderate spectrum or more on the liberal spectrum, they tend to tilt Democratic. So Democrats are always trying to get that vote to turn out. And it is quite frankly a very fickle vote. It comes out on occasion during presidential elections when there's a sexy candidate, when there's a candidate that is basically wooing them and doing everything that they believe in. But in midterm elections, the under 40 crowd is pretty much almost always dismal anyway. So it's a hard group to put your, throw all of your coins at and put your bets in terms of turning out, because historically speaking, they just don't come out for midterm elections. I think that this cycle, because of where President Biden's approval ratings are, he is noting and particularly trying to go after this younger vote. But with that being said, I think that, to your point, Batya, when you have issues of inflation, when you have young people who have student loan debt, when you have people who are forced to live in their parents' house because they can't afford their own apartments, because they can't afford rent, it is a much harder sell. In addition to, again, history repeats itself over and over again. They don't feel like there's anything for them to be excited around this election cycle. And for Democrats, it's hurtful to watch right now because the bread and butter has typically been in early voting. The early voting totals for younger voters are just bad. So the hope that they come out on Tuesday and just show up and show out, I'm going to hold it out. But it's also, it's the faith of a mustard seed, I guess, because at this point, I don't know what can be done in 24 hours to make them have any more enthusiasm than they've shown the entire election cycle.
The New York Times had a really interesting snapshot of a family, an Arizona family. Let me see if I can find this article again. I'm not going to be able to find it as I'm talking about it. It was interesting because so it's this family of four live in Arizona in Phoenix, and the mom is a MAGA, full-throated MAGA Republican, loves Trump, thinks Trump won the 2020 election. The dad is slightly right-leaning, was a libertarian, is actually a Libertarian Party voter, and is chill. Is I think a Buddhist. Then they have two adult children living with them who are both like far left Democratic socialists. And so the point of the article is about like the horrors they live. They're just always at each other's throats. They're always angry about politics. This sounds like a nightmare kind of scenario. I guess more and more families find themselves in as politics gets more and more bitter and more divisive. But if you read the article, I think you come off liking the dad the most. I would say that though, because the dad has my politics or more closely approximates my politics. But the kids and the mom are just like constantly fighting. But like, here's the thing, like the kids, one works as a pet sitter, the other is an artist. They both live at home still. You know see where I'm going with this? Like young people have to aspire to a little bit more, work a little bit harder, try a little harder in some cases in order to, if they want to envision the kind of Democratic socialist future they want. It's never, if it's paired with like an unwillingness to get out from under your parents' thumb. Sorry, you have to deal with Fox News being on the TV all day long if you're still living with your parents in your 30s. Sorry.
That's so not where I thought you were going with that.
Me either. I was so waiting for that story to take a different turn.
No, I punched left whenever I punch to my left, which
I
is
thought
everybody.
You were going to say, look, they can't even get good jobs. Look, they can't even afford rent. They're stuck in this situation.
They can't get good jobs because they majored in stupid things in college. I'm sure they could get jobs.
I think part of the issue is also it's
Arizona. It's a business-friendly state.
It's a double-edged sword. Everybody wants work flexibility. Everybody wants to be able to essentially be their own boss of sorts, and that comes in many cases with its own downsides. You can be a dog walker if you want to and schedule when you want to walk dogs, but you're not going to be able to live in a metropolitan downtown area and pay the rent on your own.
You can do that when you're 18. When you're 35, you have to get a real job. Sorry. It's just true. I mean, I don't have a real job. I talk on YouTube for a living, but that'd be my advice to people who have acrimonious family political disputes all the time. Well, you're not meant to be living together at that age. All right, well, a friendly reminder that our parent company, Nexstar, will have live election coverage of the 2022 midterms. November 8th, News Nation will be broadcasting live starting at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, partnering, of course, with Decision Desk HQ to call all of the big races. And they'll be featuring commentary from various journalists across the country, including some of us right here at The Hill. Also, we will have post-election coverage right here on Rising, so stay tuned for that. And be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any of our content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're now available anywhere that podcasts are downloaded and listened to, etc. We would appreciate if you gave us a listen on Roku and other streaming services. And I will see you back here tomorrow. Take care, everybody.